really, we are so glad to have you here. Thank you so much. I'm Isabelle, and I'm veterinarian. Yeah, you're a big fan of your work. And then really, it's hard to have words to explain our gratitude for everything that you're doing. Thank you. And then I'm here with Bruna and Karynn. Both of them are veterinarians, and they are located in Brazil, in different cities right now.
Hi, Dr. Marc. I am grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. Where do you live in Brazil?
Brasilia.
In Brasilia. I've only been to Rio. I've never been anywhere else.
Hello, Marc.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm from Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm going to start with the first one. And then you ask, and Marc, can you tell us a bit about you and your journey?
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, a city, and I used to talk to all the animals in the streets, the dogs and cats and squirrels and birds. And I think that was very important in developing my interests in non-human animals. And my parents let me do it. And I was always asking them what the animals were thinking and feeling. And some years ago, I wrote a book called Minding Animals, and it came from some discussions I had with my parents that said that I was always minding animals, taking care of them, and minding them by saying, attributing and saying that they had active minds and feelings and brains. So I think what I've wound up doing for a lot of years is in my genes.
Thank you, Marc. And then to tell more about you, there are a lot of veterinarians that's probably heard about you, but it's a pleasure to hear your journey, and have this opportunity. And then the second question, what stories could you tell us that inspire you to study the complexity of animal minds and hearts?
Well, I think those stories really came from my early childhood. I used to talk to a goldfish that my parents had. Well, I guess we all had it, my sisters and I, and nobody laughed at me. I mean, I think they maybe thought I was a little crazy, but I used to want to know how the goldfish was feeling being alone in a bowl, and how the dogs were doing when they were being pulled along by, say, a leash on the street. And when I was very young, I yelled at a man for pulling his dog and slapping the dog, and the man got angry with my father because I was like 4 years old and he couldn't get angry. I guess he could get angry with me, but it wouldn't have been a fair fight. So, but I do think, and then just stories that I would hear, and I wasn't really a very good student until I really got actively involved in studying animal cognition. That's really what I wanted to do. And I did spend 2 years in a medical school in a PhD MD program. And I really did not want to do that. I wanted to be outside and I wanted to be with non-human animals. So, yeah.
That is a really interesting story that you went from you practically gave up the medicine pathway, and then it's so hard to get a position here in the US in med school. And then this really interesting story. And about now, I'm going to ask you the third question. Could you explain what cognitive ethology is and why it is an important field?
Well, I think of cognitive ethology very simply as investigating what is in animal minds and how active they are, what they're thinking about and what they're feeling, basically. So I look at it as cognitive ethology. You know, the word cognition is in the phrase cognitive ethology. So it would be their capacities to reason and think, solve simple and complex problems. But for me, really, it's the feeling, the emotional side of things, their personalities, what drives them to do certain things, how they feel about being treated either well or not very well. So that's where I go. But I think it's important to recognize that within the field of cognitive ethology, because I'm trained mostly in biology and I do field work, I'm really interested in evolutionary questions. So one of the questions, or the way I phrase it, is that to me, it's not a question of if animals are smart or if animals have emotions and feelings, it's why they have evolved. And that's really what's guided my research and writing for a really long time. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but I think it's silly to wonder whether dogs enjoy playing. And I think it's silly to wonder whether dogs don't like being crated for 12 hours a day. You know, and some people will say, well, we don't really know that. And my response is usually that I'm glad I'm not your dog, because but I think we're not going to make progress by wondering if dogs have feelings, cats and other companion animals, and all animals, of course, but I'm sort of focusing maybe on veterinarian practice, you know, say, but I realize veterinarians work with food animals, for example, you know, and when I was doing field work, on occasion, we would need a veterinarian. But, you know, I just think it's silly to wonder whether these animals have, if you will, positive or negative feelings. I think it's really important to wonder what function they serve, why they've evolved, you know, what they're good for, and how they guide and direct behavior for non-humans and humans. So, yeah.
Thank you again, Marc. No, you're learning so much. It's so nice to hear. It's different from like reading your articles and book. It's another way to connect with what you think. And then now I'm going to the fourth question. What do you think are some of the benefits of having veterinarians learn about cognitive ethology for animals and for the community?
Well, I think I want to say important, but it's more than important. It's essential that people who interact with animals daily, like veterinarians, know what animals are thinking and feeling. I mean, and appreciate the depth of their feelings. You know, I mean, that I'll say dogs, but of course I'm referring to all animals, including reptiles and birds and fishes and amphibians, that, you know, there's certain common sense that if you don't like something, they wouldn't like it. Okay. And I realize that they have specific needs and desires and goals, if you will. But I don't see how you can treat an animal, not necessarily for a psychological disorder, although we know that dogs and other animals can have psychopathologies, but how you can treat another animal without honoring their feelings, whether are they in pain? Are they suffering? You know, do they need love and care? So I think anybody who works with non-human animals or has them in their lives, which of course includes veterinarians, needs to honor and respect their feelings and their emotions. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. So thank you again. Now I'm going to the fifth question. And before that, we also talk briefly in a chat with Jessica Pierce. That's also a colleague from you that you work together. And then she's also participating in our course.
Who is this?
Jessica Pierce.
Oh, good. Yes, I was just emailing with her that I'm talking to you, but I didn't know you were talking to her.
Yeah, she's amazing. She sent a lecture about the ethics of keeping pets that
Yes.
we need
Yes.
to talk about. It's something that we need to reflect on this issue. And thank you. And then it's so wonderful that both of you are working together in several books and several projects. It makes a huge difference.
Well,
and yeah, good people together. And then my last question, and after I'm going, Karynn is going to start to ask other questions. And then what do you see as some of the biggest consequences of our anthropocentrism and the denial of animal individuality and sentience?
When we're anthropocentric, we think it's all about us, that we're special and unique, and that our desires and needs come first. So that's a really big problem. You know, we're living in an era. I call it an era, but I mean it's really a geological time epoch or era called the Anthropocene, which people call the age of humanity, the age of humans, but it's really the rage of inhumanity. It's all about us. And you could see this spill over into one of my fields, compassionate conservation, for example, from the point of view that, we go out and there's a problem, and in order to fix the problem or coexist, we harm animals even further. I mean, we don't, but, conservation biologists. So we need to decenter humans. And I know it sounds silly to a lot of people, but we need to really coexist and figure out how we, if you will, can have and do what we need and want, and how non-humans can do the same. Because anytime we place ourselves really high up on a pyramid or a hierarchy, it means that we think we're special. And so we are special, but so too are all other animals. We are exceptional, and so too are all other animals in their own ways. So I think we need to do away with anthropocentrism. I really do.
I think all of us agree with you. And thank you so much. Karynn, now is your turn.
Thank you, Isabelle. I'm so glad to have you with us, Mark. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm gonna start with a long question. Sorry for that.
That's okay.
So along your journey of discovery as an educator, scientist, and writer concerned with non-human animals, what tools have you seen be most powerful to foster pro-animal values and attitudes?
Well, I mean, from a practical research point of view, I think the most important tool for me, because I'm an ethologist, is watching the animals. Just watch them, observe them. So many people write about animals. I mean, a lot of people write about dogs who really, the only dogs they've studied are dogs in laboratories, and there's a lot of popular media where people write about dogs and cats. They're very popular companion animals, but they've never watched them or studied them. So to me, the most important tool would be really careful observation And many years ago, I mean, quite a while ago, some vet students from Colorado State University here, which is a very good vet school, came down and went to some dog parks with me, which I loved. And they were lovely, and they were there because they felt the same way. Some of them had never really interacted with a dog or a cat or a horse or a cow or the other animals with whom they were going to have to interact in vet school and beyond. So that to me is the most important tool. But another tool is really putting all the objectivity aside and just really accepting the fact that empathy is really, really important for learning who other animals are. And it's okay to empathize. I mean, I know that there have been studies that show that some students in vet school leave with less empathy or concern for feelings than they entered. And when I first read that, I was sure that there was a mistake and the editor didn't find it. But I would have thought that they would come out with much, much more empathy. So I understand that one aspect of veterinary and even human medicine is looking at bodies as machines. You know, this organ does that and this organ does that, and they all interact and they make for a human being. Well, wonderful. But it gets back to Isabelle saying, you know, what about cognitive ethology? But what about what they're feeling? And right now we know that there's a real tight relationship between how non-humans and humans are feeling and how well they're doing, say, health-wise, well-being-wise. So those would be, I mean, some people might not think of empathy or careful observation as being tools, but I think that they are tools for connecting. And I think people should accept it and not have to make excuses that they're getting, you know, I'll hear as a scientist, you're getting too close to the animals. And then I think of my friend Jane Goodall's work where she talked about personalities and she named the animals. And then when she went back to the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, she was criticized for that. And she said, well, you know, sorry, this is what I do. You know, nobody had ever really watched wild chimpanzees. So for dogs, cats, companion animals, but as well, farm animals and the other animals, exotic pets, for example, who veterinarians see, you've got to really keep the door open for sharing feelings. So that might get me in trouble, but that's the way I feel.
Thank you, Marc. I think we forget to watch the animals, even those veterinary practice.
Well, it's hard. I mean, I wanted to say in the beginning, I know how difficult it is to be a veterinarian. I know that there's lots of, I know there's lots of unhappy veterinarians. I know there are high suicide rates. I mean, that breaks my heart. But I also know that some of the problems, at least I know from talking to some veterinarians, comes from the people, not the animals. So, you know, I can't say anything more because I'm not a veterinarian, but the people I know who years ago, I think it's changed a bit, who wanted to be veterinarians, felt really deep connections with animals, really deep. And that's what drove them to veterinary school, veterinarian, you know, to become veterinarians. Yeah. But now it's just too mechanical, too objectified. Sorry, that's just how I feel.
Yes, that's true. For Brazil as well. So my next question is, what kind of implications do you think the use of objective assessment and evaluation methods for animal emotions might have on veterinary education? Would it reinforce a bias towards objectification, or would it help to promote taking non-human animals seriously?
Yeah, I had looked at that question and I forgot, and that's what I was talking about in the previous question about objectification. There's really no reason to objectify these non-human sentient beings. I mean, sentient or not, we shouldn't, but let's just deal with maybe the most common animals who veterinarians see, and they would be mammals, vertebrates. And so objectifying them means, to me, what it would mean if I objectified you would be your feelings don't matter. You know, your expression of your feelings don't matter. And that's just wrong. I mean, it's almost like people used to say, well, these non-human animals are only acting as if they're happy, or as if they're grieving, or as if they're in pain, or as if they're suffering. But that's just wrong. So I can see the objectification working for some people, because then you're looking more at this complete organism as being some kind of machine. You know, the kidneys don't work, do this. The heart doesn't work, do this. The brain doesn't work, do this. But I think just like in human beings, along with a lot of these, if you will, physical disorders, there's also a psychological component to it. And so I was just reading a few days ago about the new research on gut biome and well-being, for example, you know, and I hadn't really thought much about it, but I am now. So objectifying a non-human, it means to me that they wouldn't be getting the best treatment they can ever get. As you know, from a veterinarian, I've taught prisoners for many years, and we don't objectify them. You know, it would be easy to do. Oh, you did something wrong, you're no good, and why should we take you seriously or your needs seriously? But I think objectification is really, to me, the antithesis of veterinary and human medicine medical practice.
Thank you, Marc. So these if animals have emotions need to be overcome.
Yes.
Is it right?
Yeah. I mean, the veterinarians I know, who I still see as friends, I don't have any dogs now, but the veterinarians who I went to, all were extremely empathic. You know, they all wanted to know a lot more than just, if you will, the physical state of my dogs. And that really helped, you know, and that doesn't mean that you can't pay close, that you shouldn't or can't pay close attention to the physiology or the anatomy or whatever's going on internally. But a lot of it is being just expressed emotionally. And so I would find it really hard. I would find it really hard to be like a psychologist or a psychiatrist listening to problems all day. And the wonderful people I know who do it well, but it exhausts them. But they're working with clients who can actually talk to them, not talk through a human being. I mean, I know dogs and other animals talk to us, but I'm getting beyond that, saying that, you know, a dog comes into a clinic with a problem and you want to solve the problem, and what the dog is feeling is important, but it's oftentimes just objectified because that's what got the human being to bring their dog into say a veterinary practice. So I also want to say that I understand that a lot of what I'm saying could add a lot more work and burden psychologically, and as well as practically, if you will, to a veterinarian's day. But I just don't see any other way out. So when I said this to a few veterinarians not too long ago, and the bottom line was we need more veterinarians. but I know that it's hard to get people to become veterinarians these days. I mean, I know that it breaks my heart. Yeah.
And Marc, how do you think the fines about sentience and invertebrates tend to be viewed by society? Do you think people still tend to deny invertebrate sentience, or are attitudes starting to shift?
I think attitudes are shifting. I don't know that they're shifting in a practical way. Because I mean, I've been vegan for a really long time, but I have friends who aren't, and that's fine. They're wonderful people. I'll buy them dinner or lunch if they eat vegan, but but sometimes we had a talk not too long ago, about do lobsters like being dropped into boiling water and eating crustaceans, and the cephalopod work on octopus. I find that to be really of interest to a lot of my friends. I mean, they're pretty well educated people for the most part, but I find them to be open to it. That they're not academics. They don't, as we say in English, beat it to death, but they're amazed at what octopus can do and feel. Then they're not at all, most of them are not at all surprised at, that a lobster doesn't like being dropped in boiling water. They're not. To me, the bottom line is, does that change their behavior? And yes, among some of my acquaintances and people I've talked to, it has. But I think that when we put out information about invertebrate sentience, for example, and it's backed by science, I think it can go a long way to changing. I mean, mostly with the invertebrates, it's going to, well, except with household pests, of course, it's going to be in, their meal plans, who they eat, what they eat. But I loved this weekend. I was talking to a woman friend of mine, and we had been talking about spiders not too long ago. And she jokingly said to me, she spent 10 minutes getting a spider out of her living room, when in the past, she probably would have just crushed it, to be honest with you. So that's good from my opinion. But I also think that the work that's being done on the invertebrates is calling attention to the general topic of sentience. And there's lots of discussions going on, which I think is really good.
Yes, me too.
Good.
And Marc, from your experience in telling people about animal emotions, what do you think should be emphasized in training veterinarians and biologists? Explorations of animal cognition, emotions, and behavior, or critical reflections on moral issues of interspecies relationships? And how are these two things related?
Well, I think, like I said before, I was really happy when these veterinary students from Colorado State University came to Boulder and watched dogs at a dog park. Many years ago, I had a student who got a PhD in animal behavior and then went to veterinary college. And he actually never really practiced, and he became a professor. But his experiences were very good for working with pre-veterinary students, as undergraduates, for example. But once again, it's so easy to do these days. I mean, people don't have to go to dog parks, and they don't have to travel. There's great videos, there's wonderful documentaries that show the behavior of companion animals and food animals, for example. Wild animals, that if someone wants to be, a wild do veterinary care for wild animals, you know, when it's needed. So once again, to me, it just gets back to watching the animals and also paying close attention to biology, evolutionary biology, Darwinian ideas about, you know, the differences among animals are differences in degree rather than kind. They're shades of gray differences. It's not human animals here, non-human animals there, and never shall the trains meet, if you will. Being trained in evolutionary biology or learning some of it about what Darwin called evolutionary continuity. You know, and really, as I say this, just after, you know, talking to some veterinarians who I know around here or I have contact with over email, you know, it all adds to the long days and the hard days that veterinarians have. But I also was wondering, and it just came to me a few days ago, that veterinary technicians, you know, I don't know how big that is outside of the US, but I know a number of people here who decided they'd rather be vet techs. They couldn't afford vet school. They didn't want to put the time in. So, you know, they have so much close contact with the non-human clients who come into veterinary practices. So I'm thrilled that so many of them have the empathy and do spend time watching animals, and maybe, you know, maybe what it means, I hate to say it this way, is that they're the people who are the bridge for getting practicing veterinarians to feel and display more empathy. I don't know. I feel very badly saying a lot of this because I know how hard, and I know the long hours, and I know a lot about the psychological state of a lot of veterinarians, but maybe they could divide the labor and they have a veterinary techs, you know, who really take care of the animals emotionally, and then the vet steps in. It doesn't mean that the practicing vet doesn't have to be empathic. They can't just go in and start, you know, pounding the animal or setting a bone without anesthesia or giving them painful shots. But maybe that's the way to settle the animal down. And then the veterinarian doesn't have to do that. I don't know. I mean, I think about it a lot because it shocks me how many people I've talked to who say came into undergraduate years in the United States, but maybe, you know, elsewhere too, and wanted to be veterinarians and then decided not to be. And I see 3 wonderful women here sitting here who are veterinarians. I just wonder, you know, how the hell do you do it? I mean, seriously, I just touches my heart.
Thank you, Marc. This is our last question. So, what recommendations would you give to students and professionals in veterinary medicine who want to learn more about cognitive ethology?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do would be to go watch, you know, dogs or other animals at dog parks or watch videos. I mean, there's plenty of literature out there, but I remember the 2 years I spent in medical school, I almost went blind with all the reading I have to do. And so it was a pleasure for me to go watch animals running around in a park. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's all accessible, but maybe it could be woven into the curriculum. I think some vet schools have electives in basically behavior. I think they do. I'm not quite sure, but I think they do. Or just a lot of them have their own companion animals. You know, I once had, it was not quite an argument, but it could have been. I'm not an argumentative person, but, you know, I said to somebody, well, you know, it was a practicing veterinarian and he was great. He was a lovely man. but, you know, he said, sometimes he just gets really pushed. And I said, well, do you live with a dog or a cat? And he did. I said, well, would you like your dog or cat to be treated the way you feel that you have to treat these animals in order to see an animal every 15 minutes? I mean, I wasn't being negative about it. I mean, that was how busy he was. And it actually gave him pause. It actually made him think about it, you know. But once again, what I said before is, and I don't know the details, but a lot of psychosomatic emotional conditions in humans manifest themselves physically in other ways. I would be surprised if that wasn't true in dogs and cats, and when I say at least the mammals among mammals, but I also know that social parrots who can live for 90 years as pets, when they're kept alone, they age much faster. Their telomeres show aging of, you know, individuals who are 4 times as old. So I hesitate to say mammals only, but maybe, you know, for any animal who winds up being a companion animal of sorts to people, understanding that their emotional state is really important, because it might generate or magnify physiological conditions. I mean, you know all this, but I think it's important.
Mark, I was wondering, listening to you, that we could also watch the urban animals as well, like rats and pigeons and bats. They are living with us, and we don't watch them.
Yes, in fact, it's funny. I almost said that before, but now I'll say it. You're absolutely right. I mean, during, you know, the beginning of COVID, even around Boulder, where there are a lot of wild animals really close to Boulder, but they were coming down into the streets more: foxes, black bears, mountain lions or cougars. And people, I mean, it was great because people were asking me what they could look for. You know, some of them were afraid, and yes, there's good reason to fear a cougar or a black bear, you know, but they were asking me, what could they learn? How could they watch them? I was so thrilled about that. So you're right. Even watching, you know, birds around towns. Yeah, and that's another. To me, that would be a wonderful substitute for watching the animals and getting outside. I'm not in, I mean, I sit enough at my desk indoors writing and doing things that any opportunity I can get to get outside, I take. So I ride my bike a lot, and I say hello to the cows and the sheep and the prairie dogs and the birds, and people think and there's a great pig farm, which depresses me, but the pigs are really beautiful and friendly. And my friends think I'm crazy, but they know that I'm going to talk to these animals when I ride my bike. But so what it boils down to is firsthand experience. Yeah, I mean, that really, and that gets back to ethology, the experience of watching and appreciating other animals for who they are. And on a bicycle ride about 2 years ago, we were riding in the country north of Boulder, and there were a bunch of goats playing King of the Mountain. So all of a sudden, this woman I was riding with yelled, "Stop!" She said, and really, she was so excited. She said, "Oh, they really do that." And I hadn't seen what was going on. So we all turned around, and she said, they really do play King of the Mountain, you know, jumping on the hay bales. And we spent 20 minutes watching them. And I really, all I said was, because I didn't want people to think I was some kind of nutball, all I said was, so you see, they have fun and they play. And, oh, by the way, they become food. And then I didn't say anything more because I'm not that type of person. But that was a great example. She was so excited. She had heard that these animals play King of the Mountain on the hay bales, but she'd never seen it. And there they were rotating and fighting to get on the top of these stacks of hay bales. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marc. It was wonderful. Thank you a lot.
Well, I hope I didn't say anything that'll make people angry, but it might.
Thank you so much, Marc. You cannot control what people are going to do, right?
I totally agree with you, but for me, you know, I mean, it really is. It's difficult for me because I just know from reading and from talking to some veterinarians how hard it is to be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
It just is.
And then I think you know Daniela Castillo. I was talking to her.
Yes.
Yeah, I also invited her.
Oh, good. She's wonderful.
Yeah, Daniela is wonderful. And she told me, I know him. Oh my God, you know him. That's so wonderful.
Yeah, we've exchanged a lot of emails, and she came to Boulder once. I can't remember when. Oh, she worked in Boulder actually at the emergency clinic. And I remember I kept thinking to myself, gosh, I hope that they can tolerate you. But I meant that in a positive way, because she would just melt every time she saw, you know, a dog or other animal in distress. So, oh, good. I'm glad. Yes. She's wonderful. Yes.
She is. I'm glad that I contact her, and then she's very lovely, and that's really nice that all of you are connected. Thank you so much. I think it's really hard to be a veterinarian, and then only for people to know. Sometimes in Brazil is a little bit different, Marc, and then you have more than 400 veterinary schools.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. So would you say in Brazil there's enough veterinarians?
We have a lot. The point is they are very like concentrated in certain areas, of course, and it's more, I think, competitive. And the point is, you don't have technicians who have veterinary assistants, and they don't have the same role as technicians here. Technicians here, they even do the anesthesia. They are really, they only don't do surgery and then prescribe medications and they do the diagnostics. Other things, they do everything.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, they do so many things. In Brazil, the assistants, they just help like cleaning cages, holding animals, and very basic functions. It's different.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that, because I had a bunch of students some years ago who you know, they got credit. You know, it was like almost a research project. They got credit for going to like a local veterinarian. They were like what we call physician's assistants. After a couple of months, I was shocked at how much they were doing, which was wonderful. I mean, the things they were doing were perfectly okay. You know, they weren't doing surgeries or necessarily, you know, diagnosing different, you know, conditions, but two of them did go on to vet school. And as far as I can tell, they are practicing veterinarians because of that. Oh, I did not realize there were that many vet schools.
Yes.
Wow.
More than 400. And then here we have about 30, I think.
Yeah, in the entire country. Yeah.
Yes.
So is it like that in a lot of other countries?
No. We have a very different, very unique situation in Brazil. That's why it's so important for us to reach as many students, as many professionals, because you have a huge amount of veterinarians that are graduating each year.
Wow. So is it, I know it would be difficult to answer, but do you think it's, quote, easier to be a veterinarian in Brazil than in the United States?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
much easier because
Okay,
you
yeah.
have more schools,
Yeah.
and then also, it's not as expensive as United States too.
Yeah, that's the other problem. And it, it's the same problem for medical school and dental school here. There's no fellowships, but I think, and I'm not sure, the doctors and the dentists make more money than the veterinarians, in the United States, I think.
I think here, because there's shortage, the things are changing for veterinarians. However, in Brazil, because you have a huge number of veterinarians, it's hard to find a good place to pay you well.
Okay.
And it's a different, it's different like obstacles that probably veterinarians in Brazil are facing now.
Right.
Yeah, when I started, I think probably you have maybe 30 schools in the entire country, or maybe a little bit.
Wow.
And then you have this expansion of a veterinary field also, because it's profitable to have schools and having people train and have professors, and
Right.
a huge market.
Wow. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, for example, it's much easier to get an X-ray and a dog, and much cheaper to do an echocardiogram in Brazil. It's easier to find. And then here, for example, people don't know how hard it is. Sometimes you have to travel to other city to do some exams.
Oh, yeah. I know people I know a lot of people from like Southern Colorado who go up to the Colorado State University because it's such a good vet school and they have great veterinarians there. But they could travel hundreds of miles to have something done. Wow. Well, thank you all, and good luck with all you're doing.
Thank you again for your time and for everything. It's a big learning for us. All the time you are learning. Learning is an evolution, right? Yeah.
So how can I spread the word about your this program?
I sent you the link.
Okay. Yes, I saw that. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think by now, I believe that's more than 1,700 people that enrolled.
Good luck.
I would like to also tell you that Bruna that initiated that, she reached me out, and then she's a veterinary student. She's a wonderful person. And then
Thank you.
and she invites Karynn and all of these people. She's the one that is kind of, putting all people together.
Thank you. Yeah, well, given the number of vet schools you have, and say maybe the number of veterinarians, this is a wonderful opportunity for adding a lot more compassion and empathy and dignity and all those big positive words to veterinary practice in Brazil. It really is. Yeah, that's great. I wish something like that could be done here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marc.
You bet.
Thank you. Bye-bye.